Good evening and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I'm excited to be your host this evening on Friday night in the big town here. Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. We've got a lot of fun stuff to be able to interact, talk about, be able to go back and forth in the comments section, and just have some really good interaction tonight here on what's going to be a little bit more of a laid back type of Friday. I'm super excited to be able to join with you guys and just be able to talk some Dodgers baseball in what is during baseball season. Baseball season is here. Pitchers and catchers are in Camelback Ranch. They have been working out over the past week. We're already basically a week into the start of spring training. Spring training games will be starting up pretty soon. Super excited about that. It's just going to be me tonight. Casey and I were supposed to go live on Friday. He is busy with it being Valentine's Day. He's going out with his bride of 25 years. So happy for him to be able to do that. I've still got some work to do on that, so I'm more than happy to be joining you guys here Friday night, Dodgers Dawgs, here on the Dodgers Daily Network. And I'm excited to be able to talk because I personally, and this is just a personal thing, I'm super excited to be going to spring training for the first time coming up pretty soon. We'll be landing in Arizona on Wednesday, then going to the games Thursday in Camelback Ranch, Friday over in Mesa to go watch the Cubs-Dodgers games, and then Saturday also back at Camelback Ranch before I fly back here to the great state of Michigan. So I'm excited to be able to experience spring training for the first time coming up, which made me think of some of the biggest things that I'm going to be looking out for in spring training. Obviously, when we get to camp, when we get to spring training, a lot of the focus are on the guys that are going to be the highlight of the season for the Dodgers. It is what's going to happen with Shohei Ohtani. Is he going to be able to replicate his amazing 50-50 performance of last year while being able to pitch? How far is his pitching progressing? What is the storyline of a player like a Mookie Betts at the shortstop position? How is his throwing doing? How is he able to field that position? Is that position going to be too taxing, or is it one of those things where you need to preoccupy his mind to make sure that he's integrated, he's active in the game? Is that something where this is something that's beneficial, and was a full offseason unlock a better version of Mookie Betts at the shortstop position? How's the health of a player like a Freddie Freeman doing? There's a lot of these different types of conversations that we get for the superstar players, which certainly is noteworthy, certainly is going to have a huge impact for the Dodgers this upcoming season. It is absolutely essential that the Dodgers get answers on this and that the Dodgers are able to find out exactly how these players are going to be doing and just how good, just how healthy they are. They're going to have a massive impact on the 2025 season. The margins also matter. And when you're talking about spring training, it's super fun in these games because half of the games you get to see the regulars, the guys that are likely going to be there on the major league roster, or at least half the lineup plus 3/4 of the lineup is going to be filled with major league players that are going to be on the big league roster that are going to get active starts through the 2025 season. And then half the time you get to look at a little bit of the future, or potentially you get a little bit at an extended run for some of the guys that could be fighting for some positional spots on this roster. And that is something that I'm perhaps most fascinated about. We'll get into a little bit of roster talk. We'll get into a little bit of news with the Dodgers in just a little bit. But it is that fight, that grind for potentially some opening spots that I think is so incredibly fascinating for this Dodgers team, because there might be, and I'm going to explore this a little bit because the last show that I did, perhaps it's something that you might not disagree with, and I have a little bit of back and forth that I want to do continuing onto that. What might be best for the 2025 Dodgers might be not something that you completely agree with, but I think roster-wise potentially could be the best fit. Might not be the best case scenario for 2026. So how do you balance the now? How do you balance the future? And how do you mix in between? And what exactly is the role that these guys are fighting for? All fascinating questions that we're going to explore here. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network here on a Friday night. Couldn't be more happy to be joined by you guys. Thank you very much for joining. Go Dodgers and God bless. History Man, back at you. Craig Osterberg, thank you for joining us. Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, and Daryl Jackson as well. So, what I want to get into first is the position player battle. First off, we're gonna address this just right off the front set, and then because it is noteworthy and newsworthy, it sounds like Will Smith might be a little bit behind where he normally is at. I don't remember exactly the comments that were made on that, nor do I know exactly to what extent of any type of potential injury Will Smith might have. I'm not saying that he does have any type of injury. There are reports, though, that he's a little bit more behind where he normally is going into spring training, which is a bit concerning for the Dodgers because Will Smith is the starting catcher for the Dodgers. And he's not just a part-time catcher or a every other day type of catcher like they do sometimes at the minor league level. He takes 3/4 of the workload. He takes 500 plate appearances while Austin Barnes gets 120 something plate appearances per year. He takes the bulk of the workload, and especially since he had to go through take a bulk of the workload last year, not really get a whole lot of time at the designated hitter position because Shohei Ohtani has the designated hitter position locked up. He didn't get a whole lot of time over there. So then he was catching majority of the time that he was actually playing, played through an entire postseason, including a World Series. That can be absolutely taxing on you, and it is a little bit concerning for Will Smith if there is any sort of lingering effects of that or whatever else might be going on. Absolutely is concerning. Will Smith is an anchor of this lineup. He is a reliable guy that has a bit of pop, right-handed bat in this lineup, and I think that is one of the things that is key to this lineup is having that right-handed bats that have a little bit of that. You have Mookie Betts, you have re-signed Teoscar Hernandez. There also is quite a bit of left-handed hitters in this lineup that you are relying upon. So having a bat like Will Smith, I think, is important. He provides a little bit of that right-handed consistency that we've seen throughout the years with Will Smith. I don't know the extent of Will Smith's injury. Neither does anybody. Neither do you. The only people that know that would be Will Smith and the Dodgers if there is any type of injury. What I will say with this following along, it is something that we're going to be watching along rather closely, depending on how things go in spring training, which as spring training games are going to be starting, which in 6 days, the first game, Dodgers versus Cubs in Camelback Ranch, is going to be taking place. As these spring training games start, take a look out to see how much playing time Will Smith is going to be able to get. How does he actually look at the catcher position to see just how ready he's going to be for opening day, for the start of the season, whether there's going to be any sort of setbacks for a Will Smith. Now, for that catching position, let's just say that there's going to be some type of setback. The length of the setback very likely determines the outcome of who the opportunity is given to you after that setback. And it could vary based off of specific timing. What I mean by that is, if it's Will Smith, and it's not going to be an extended run, extended time period in which he's going to be gone, it very likely is going to be a Hunter Fiducia that would fill in the shoes for a Will Smith. You would have him, you would have Austin Barnes. Those would be your two catchers. If it were to be a more extended time period that Will Smith would be absent, I would expect at some point, perhaps right out of spring training, that could be a possibility, and especially if the Dodgers want to add another player that could potentially win Rookie of the Year, especially if they're going to have to rely on him for quite a bit in a Dalton Rushing. They could have him be one of the primary catchers and have him fill in the shoes. Certainly on the offensive side, he is ready to do so, and I think at the catching side, he's got a lot of upside and ability to be able to help and manage a rotation, manage a pitching staff. I think he would be really good at that. But one of the things that with that, it could be he starts right away. That could be a possibility, although I wouldn't necessarily anticipate that. What I would think would happen is they would probably start with an Austin Barnes and a Hunter Fiducia, and then at some point probably bring up Dalton Rushing, although it certainly remains a possibility that they could call him up right away. One of the complicating factors with Dalton Rushing and calling him up, he is not currently on the active 40-man roster. So you would have to likely move somebody to the 60-day injured list to be able to call up Dalton Rushing. And then later in the season, let's just say somebody from the 60-day injured list, let's say they move Clayton Kershaw to the 60-day injured list. When they call back up Clayton Kershaw when he is healthy, then you got to make some sort of other moves and things start getting a little bit more complicated. And what happens at the end of the season? Things just get a little bit more complicated. Not too complicated though, to where that becomes something that you wouldn't necessarily consider. If they believe that he can win Rookie of the Year, they could call him up right away. If they want to manipulate service time, which if you keep him in the minor leagues through the first couple of weeks of the season, you can get an extra year of service time. That is something that a lot of other organizations take advantage of. You can keep him down at the minor leagues. However, I don't think this is going to end up being necessarily the conversation that we're going to have. I still am expecting, or at least perhaps this is a unwilling or a just one of those mindsets of hopefulness that Will Smith is still going to be ready and available at the catching position. That is not something that we should rule out, or that should be something that we shouldn't expect. We should probably still expect him to be the catcher regularly at the beginning of the season or towards the beginning of the season until we learn otherwise. Until then, the initial backup plan, especially if it's for short term, is Austin Barnes' Hunter Fiducia. And I think another reason that this is important is for Dalton Rushing, for his future in LA. If he wants to be a Dodger, the only way with Will Smith on this roster, unless Will Smith physically can't take the catching position or severely reduces his role at the catching position, and even then we got another conversation that we're going to have, one of the only ways for Dalton Rushing to be able to make it and stick on this Dodgers roster is for him to have the ability to both play catcher and left field. If he has the ability to do both, there could be a spot for him, depending on the moves that the Dodgers make in the future. If it is something where he can only play the catching position, which this is unfortunately one of the things that is ailing a Hunter Fiducia when we'll talk about it in a little bit, talk about the 13th position player spot. He does not play another position, so that kind of boxes him in, especially when Austin Barnes doesn't get a whole lot of opportunities. You don't necessarily need a third catcher at this moment with three catchers that can't play any other position. For Dalton Rushing to make an impact onto this roster in the future, he has to play catcher and he has to play left field. He has not had a lot of time to be able to play left field, and as you've heard from some of the coaches that he's been instructed by on this program, it's likely going to take him consistent at-bats in the outfield and consistent reps out there in order to get comfortable. The Dodgers do not have that ability to give him those consistent outfield reps unless there is, and this is not something that I'm hoping for, unless there is some type of injury that happens in the outfield to either a Michael Conforto or a Teoscar Hernandez. If both of them are on the roster, Dalton Rushing is not getting opportunities in the outfield, or very limited opportunities in the outfield, which means that his only opportunities would be able to come at the catching position, which, if Will Smith is out for an extended period of time, he would get an extended run down there. Otherwise, for the future of Dalton Rushing on this roster, you would expect and anticipate him to get opportunities both at the catching position in OKC as well as the outfield, because I think that is the only way that we're going to be able to see Dalton Rushing have consistent long-term run on this roster, assuming that there is going to be an opening in the outfield, particularly the corner outfield, or at least a part-time role in a corner outfield spot for Dalton Rushing to be able to play in there play some time at the catching position, then you could potentially see a role in a future for Dalton Rushing. That's all I have to say about the Will Smith talk. We will learn more as more becomes available. I'm not concerned. I'm not pressing the panic button right now, but it is noteworthy to be able to take note of that, particularly because I learned a little bit more about an injury from a guy like an Evan Phillips. He's going to be out for more of an extended run of time, which is incredibly disappointing for the Dodgers because he was one of the main bullpen pieces to be added to this Dodgers back in the end bullpen. It makes significantly more sense why the Dodgers not only attacked a Tanner Scott, but also they went out and got a Kirby Yates because there was a necessity to be able to bring in an additional reliever to be able to add on to this mix to replace some of the stuff for an Evan Phillips. I don't know how long Evan Phillips is going to be out, I believe, and I don't want to necessarily get this injury wrong, but during the World Series, there was a very specific reason as far as why that he was out, and that's because I think he tore his rotator cuff or something like that. There was an injury to his rotator cuff that caused him to be able to be out for an extended period of time. So I don't know when Evan Phillips is going to be able to be back. I wish it nothing but the best to be in his recovery. And the Dodgers do not have a need to rush an Evan Phillips up on this roster. What this does allow for this team is it does allow for them to have a little bit more flexibility to bring somebody up from the minor league system of that up-down train Casey and I have been talking about throughout the entire offseason as far as how is this math going to work. Typically, throughout the course of the offseason, things happen and usually this is an unfortunate part of pitching, especially the state of pitching nowadays. Guys get injured quite a bit. And so there starts to become opportunities for you to be able to call guys up, or some of the guys that you are bringing in from spring training, if they impress, perhaps call them up, give them a couple of outings. If things go well, maybe keep them around a little bit, and maybe they'll turn into the next Anthony Bonda. Maybe they'll turn into the next Ryan Brazier, or you could designate them for assignment. It is unfortunate, but Evan Phillips is going to be out for a little bit of time. We'll see when he is able to come back. That type of stuff likely is and very well could happen throughout the course of spring training. It will happen throughout the course of the regular season. So what the Dodgers have done is they built an abundance of depth, especially on the pitching side, to where you are very concerned about how they are going to fit all of these guys onto this roster. One of the ways they're going to be able to do that, unfortunately, comes through injuries and being able to fill in innings that way. Happens every single year. We'll see what the health of a lot of the other pitchers are. That's going to be another fun storyline to be able to follow throughout the course of the offseason is what is the health of every single pitcher on this roster. That is a storyline to be able to follow. Who gets a bulk of innings? How do the guys look, especially the guys that help carry the Dodgers through the postseason in 2024, who got an extended workload? How does the bullpen arms from 2024 season, how are they looking when they were overused last year or used quite a bit last year? Will be something to be able to watch over if you are the Los Angeles Dodgers, and something that I'm pretty excited about to be able to do. However, one of the things that I want to talk about, and this is something that I had addressed during the previous show that I had, has nothing to do with those two battles. Will Smith, looking at his health, looking at the battle between Hunter Fiducia and Dalton Rushing, it's fascinating. I wish nothing but the best for both of them, and both of them deserve opportunities at the big league level, and I think, at least in Dalton Rushing's sake, he's going to get that opportunity. Whether Hunter Fiducia is going to be able to get an opportunity in Los Angeles, I think it really depends on injuries, which sucks for him because he deserves an opportunity to be a backup catcher. That is something to keep note of. The health of pitchers, absolutely, it's something to keep note of. But what I find as perhaps the most fascinating battle, this is in part what the title of video is the battle for the 13th position player spot. This, I think, is one of the most fascinating things that we can be able to discuss in spring training, and the thing that I'm probably going to be watching the closest, because you are watching 3 individuals scratch and claw for their opportunity at the big league level, and each of them, yes, every single one of them, all 3 of them, have a case to be able to make for the big league roster. Now, it's not just the 3 of them fighting for a big league opportunity. There are other guys that are invited to spring training camp that are fighting for opportunities. Guys like an Austin Gauthier, play a whole bunch of different positions, gets on base at an extraordinary level and doesn't strike out a whole lot, or at least reasonable enough for the amount that he can get on base. How much power is he able to add this season is going to be a really fun thing to watch. A Cody Hosey, what is he going to be able to make of himself? I don't think it likely happens with the Dodgers, but is he able to impress enough for other organizations to make an impact and to have them take note of him? Those are 2 guys that I just thought of at the top of my head that I think are really intriguing to be able to see, okay, what are they going to be able to do at the start of the season? Alex Freeland is another one. What is he going to be able to do to be able to showcase what his future next steps are? Is the progression that we saw during the last couple of weeks during the AAA season and what we saw through a vast majority of the summer last year, are those improvements more of a sign of what the player he actually is? Or is he the player that he was when he first started in Oklahoma City? I would assume it's closer to the former rather than the latter, but we will have to wait and see. And especially with Mookie Betts at the shortstop position, we don't know how exactly he's going to handle that too well. I know there's some video posted around by Mike Salas talking about Alex Freeland. After everybody left, he's out there taking practice, taking reps at the shortstop position. Just amazing to be able to watch his work ethic in motion, because this is something that he desperately wants. Those are not the guys that I'm talking about for the 13th position player spot. And this is assuming that everybody is healthy. So let me make it a little bit of a distinguishment between position players and pitchers. For pitchers in this game, in this day and age, are much more likely or get injured much more frequently in comparison to position players. We see guys go down with different injuries, different Tommy John surgeries, shoulder surgeries, all sorts of different injuries on the pitching side, because they are maximizing their body to be able to get the most effective velocity, the most effective stuff that they possibly can. And the human body just was not completely designed to do that type of stuff. And there's still a lot of research being done to be able to find the best way to keep these guys as healthy as they possibly can be. Injuries happen frequently on the pitching side. For the position player side, injuries happen infrequently, and they're much more of a freak accident when injuries happen position player side. Pitchers, they happen quite frequently. Position players, far less common. And so when we're talking about the 13th position player spot, this is assuming that the rest of the position players are going to be healthy for a majority or of all of the regular season. Not all of them will, but it's only maybe a couple of them that aren't going to be healthy for at least a good chunk of the regular season. So the 12 that are currently locked in are Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez, Max Muncy, Will Smith, Michael Conforto, Tommy Edman, Austin Barnes, Miguel Rojas, Kike Hernandez, welcome back Kike, and Chris Taylor. I know a lot of you might disagree with Chris Taylor being locked in. However, as I am putting it right now, Chris Taylor is locked in on this roster. Until the Dodgers change my mind on that and decide to move on, which certainly could be the case. And I think there's certainly a case to be made that Chris Taylor needs to have a good spring training in order for him to cement himself on this roster. I think there's a good argument to be able to have right that, because I think he has a little bit of redundancy. That being said, with him under contract for, I believe, $15 million, and with this being such a big year for him and what he's meant to this organization, I'm still anticipating Chris Taylor being part of this roster. Happy to have that conversation, happy to have that disagreement a little bit later. But if those players are healthy, and if those players are part of the position player group, that leaves the inevitable the inevitable for there to be a position player battle between three members. Hae-Sung Kim signed to a contract with the Dodgers during the offseason. International free agent, signed to I believe it was a 3-year, $12.5 million deal. There might be a couple of extra club options. I don't remember exactly the contract. Signed to a multi-year deal with the Dodgers from the KBO. How is he going to be able to adapt? But what's noteworthy about that is the Dodgers didn't spend just a little bit of money. They spent a decent chunk of money to be able to go out and get a Hae-Sung Kim over to this Dodgers organization. Very versatile, would fit in well with the second base position. It's still a little bit of a question how well he's going to be able to adapt, although I think the Dodgers are anticipating him to be able to move around to different position like shortstop, which there's still questions about his defense at the shortstop position. It might be solid, it might be a little bit shaky over there. Can move around a little bit, especially on the infield side. Hae-Sung Kim, a little bit of versatility there. Definitely that speed, definitely that contact-oriented type of approach. You also have James Outman, who is one of the, and probably one of the best defensive center fielders within this organization. And out of the players that are close to the major league roster, he is the best defensive outfielder that this organization has. He's better than Andy Pages at center field. He's better than Teoscar Hernandez and Michael Conforto. There could be some arguments that you could have between a James Outman and a Tommy Edman, let's say, at the center field position. But James Outman is rock solid. He would be able to hold that position well, or about as well as you could ask for on this team. Last year at the major league level, there was quite a bit of struggle. There was quite a bit of swing and miss, as we've seen throughout his career. Last year, it just was not pretty, the numbers. We don't have to reinforce that. At the minor league level, though, he was able to showcase that he has the ability to hit at the minor league level. I believe a 130 WRC plus in 2024 after being sent down in AAA Oklahoma City through several months of the year. He was able to produce at that level. Will he get another opportunity for the Los Angeles Dodgers? And then you have the man who spent the majority of the 2024 season on the Dodgers, and that's Andy Pages. He is perhaps one of the most intriguing names, if not the most intriguing name of all the players that are going into spring training as far as what he's going to be able to do. He's got a world of power. The Dodgers fans were able to see that just a little bit, even though he could definitely tap into his power potential quite a bit. He's able to mash left-handed pitching. Last year, 157 WRC plus against left-handed pitching versus righties. It was about an 82, which isn't great. It's also not the worst in the world if you're talking about a rookie hitter coming up, especially with a rookie hitter that hadn't spent a whole lot of time at the AAA level, Oklahoma City. Defensively in center field, there remains a question about his ability to be able to consistently hold down the center field position for this Dodgers team, and just some of the routes and stuff that he made. There is question marks with his ability to play center field. However, if there is a role for Andy Pages, it must be in center field. So I talked a little bit on the show on Monday. I made the case for why the Dodgers should trade an Andy Pages. And there certainly is a lot of reason to be able to make that argument. The crux of my argument, just to recap what my argument is, then we'll do a counter argument as far as why there might be a little bit of hesitation to be able to do that. The crux of my argument has to do with this final 13th position player spot. What is the role that these guys are fighting for? If the role that these guys are fighting for is close to a Chris Taylor type of role, meaning a role where it's likely to be 200, at most 300 different plate appearances, not a whole lot, not consistent, that's maybe 2 to 3 starts a week. Maybe one of the starts, you get a at bat off the bench. Although if you look at the starting lineup, where are you gonna pinch hit for? There's not a whole lot of different options that you could have to pinch hit for. Maybe Max Muncy versus left-handed pitching. Maybe you could say the same thing with Michael Conforto. maybe a whatever the ninth spot is for right now. It's projected for Ha-Seong Kim, but let's say that's Kike Hernandez. Maybe you do that for him. There's not a whole lot of pinch hit opportunities. What is the role that these guys are fighting for? For a Ha-Seong Kim, is he fighting for the everyday second base position because they believe in his defensive ability and they want that contact ability at the bottom of the lineup? Is he fighting for a starting second base position, or is he fighting for a platoon situation where Kike Hernandez is going to get a decent chunk? You're going to see Miguel Rojas get a decent chunk in there, and then Ha-Seong Kim be able to fill in every so often on their roster as well. That could be a possibility for him. If it is a James Outman, is it and this would be my expectation, with the role of James Outman, it would be he fills in the center field position. He locks that down when he is in there, which, if you have one concern about this Dodgers team, has to do with their defense. Their defense is not going to be spectacular, especially in the outfield. If you have Conforto and you have Pages in center, and it's still the same exact defense that we saw in 2024, and then you have Teoscar Hernandez in right field, that's not a great recipe for success in the outfield between those individuals. And so having a James Outman could potentially lock up the center field defense that would force Tommy Edman to second base, and then you feel comfortable about both center field and second base. And if Mookie Betts able to take some strides, then you feel really solid about your up the middle defense, the most important defensive spots on this team. And especially with James Outman, I mean, you look at the bats that are coming off the bench. You have Austin Barnes, you have Miguel Rojas, you have Chris Taylor, you have Kike Hernandez. There's not a left-handed bat coming off that bench. Could it be something where, just as far as the bat wise, as far as the way whether they're righty or lefty coming off the bat, is James Outman the best fit for the 2025 roster? It's a good question to be able to have. And in fact, it would probably be my argument in the best case scenario for this Dodgers, if you were to get the best version of each one of these players, that he honestly would probably be the best fit out of these three players for this roster, because of his ability to play defense, because of his ability to have a left-handed bat at the plate, and because he has the ability to go out there and fill in exactly what a lot of the holes are for this team. Allows you to move Tommy Edman to second base. Is that my expectation? Probably not. We still have a lot to see with James Outman, especially at the major league level. But it would be best case scenario for the Dodgers for him to probably be able to do that if we're talking exclusively about the 2025 season. So then we get to my argument, and then we get into conversation about Andy Pages, because he is a player with a world of talent, a world of potential, somebody that I wanted and expected to get regular, consistent at-bats at the big league level. I wanted him to be able to play the center, be able to be a starting corner outfield for the Dodgers this upcoming season. I wanted him to be the right fielder for the Dodgers. Teoscar Hernandez, you could resign him and put him in left field. I would have been completely happy with that, as long as Andy Pages got consistent, regular at-bats. As soon as they signed Michael Conforto, and as soon as they were able to re-sign Teoscar Hernandez, and in fact, as soon as they re-signed Teoscar Hernandez to more than just a one-year deal, that sealed the fate for Andy Pages as far as what his future within this organization must be. Andy Pages is not going to be a corner outfielder if he's going to be a Los Angeles Dodger. In order for him to be on this roster long term, with the ticking clock that is on Andy Pages as far as his service time at the major league level, it has to be at the center field position. And let me explain why. This year, it's obvious. Michael Conforto is the left fielder. Teoscar Hernandez is the right fielder. You do not have a designated hitter's position open because Shohei Ohtani is filling in that spot both this year and in the future. So it has to fill in those spots. If we're talking about corner outfielders in the future, you're going to have Teoscar Hernandez, not just for this year, but for the following two seasons. So long term, Teoscar Hernandez is filling up one of the corner outfield spots. He's not a platoon player. He's going to go out there and play every single day. The other corner outfield spot, something that we talked a little bit earlier about in the show. We talked about Dalton rushing. If he has a spot, if he has a role on this team, it has to be a catcher and it has to be in the corner outfield. If you want to fit him on this roster with Will Smith locked up long term on this team, which means that there's a good chunk of those at bats in the corner outfield. They're going to be taken up by a Dalton rushing. There also is, and if we're talking about future opportunities for free agents, you look at different free agents that the Dodgers might target. Kyle Tucker is going to be a free agent next year. I'm not saying they're going to go out and get Kyle Tucker, but he certainly is going to be somebody that they're going to be interested in. You look at a lot of other players. There really is not a whole lot of other players that have the ability or guys that you would feel comfortable about with their at-bats that would also have the ability to play center field as well, which I think is gridlocking or making it a little bit more difficult for Andy Pages to lock down a corner outfield spot long-term on this roster. I think the only way for him to be able to long-term on this roster with the moves that they are likely wanting and likely will make on this team is at the center field position. How does he look in center field? And what is the best way to be able to get him to a place to where he is comfortable, to where he has the ability to be able to lock down center field on this team? Because if we're talking about exclusively the 2025 Dodgers, we already had mentioned, or at least it was my assumption, my case that I had made, that for fit on the 2025 roster. Now, this is not talking about necessarily production. That has to be taken into account, and that's ultimately going to decide the fit. But if you just look at the profile of player for the 2025 roster, I think James Outman fits this team better than Andy Pages does. That's not to say James Outman is a better player right now, nor is he a better player for the 2025 season than what Andy Pages does, but better defensive center fielder, left-handed bats is a lot better than questionable center field defense with already questionable defense in the outfield and a right-handed bat, in which case there's a lot of right-handed bats off of the bench. And that is the case, especially because Andy Pages, as I had mentioned, I believe a world of potential is in, and a lot of other teams believe a world of potential in a right-handed bat of Andy Pages, who does still have an option year to the minor league level. However, if you decide to do that, if you decide to have James Outman as part of your roster because he is the better fit, and let's say that he outperforms both Ha-Seong Kim and Andy Pages in spring training, let's say you have him on the roster, then Andy Pages does not have any minor league options, in which case, if you want to, in the 2026 season, have Andy Pages be on your roster, it's like signing a free agent. He would have to be on your major league roster. So then that leads to the question of, and this was the question of the show that I had on Monday, is the time to trade Andy Pages if he's not going to win the starting center field position, and especially because I don't want Andy Pages to sit on the bench. That's not going to serve him any good. I think he needs regular, consistent at-bats. Is the time to be able to maximize on the value that Andy Pages has right now or after spring training, assuming that there's not going to be a whole lot of injuries, nor there is going to be a role immediately for Andy Pages, because I believe the team could fill in a lot of different injury spots throughout the course of the season. That was my question as far as whether the opportunity, because if you send Andy Pages down to the minor leagues, the value that he has now is vastly dropped than the value that he will have with no minor league options, with no flexibility to another organization. That is something that is very much apparent. So then that leads to the question of 2025, James Outman the better fit. But what about 2026 and beyond? And this is where things get incredibly difficult, and this is where I think there is a lot of pushback potentially towards my argument with Andy Pages, has to do with right-handed bats as part of this lineup. Let's look at some of the bats that are going to be part of the lineup. Rather, let's look at the bats that have a chance of not being part of this lineup, and then we'll talk about guys that could help fill in different roles for this team in 2026. Again, we're already talking about 2026 right now because spring training 2025 has an impact on spring training and beyond in 2026 and beyond. Let's look at the bats that are going to be part of this team in 2026. Shohei Ohtani, left-handed bat. Mookie Betts, righty. Freddie Freeman, lefty. Teoscar Hernandez, righty. Max Muncy, I'm assuming that he's going to be back. He has a club option for $10 million. I would anticipate, as of right now, the Dodgers to pick it up. Left-handed bat. Will Smith is going to be a righty. Michael Conforto will not be on the team unless the Dodgers re-sign him. Tommy Edman will be on the team, switch-handed bat. Ha-Seong Kim, left-hander. You look at the bench, you could see a scenario where potentially all of the guys on the bench are replaced. Austin Barnes is up after this season. There's a chance they bring him back if they want to get him to his 10 years of service, although with Dalton rushing, that complicates things quite a bit. Miguel Rojas is getting up there in age. He's not under contract next year. That's another right-handed bat that they're losing out on. Chris Taylor, if they get him through this season and he struggles again, there's no reason to pick up his club option for next season. Kike Hernandez, they could always bring back Kike Hernandez if he's able to perform, especially if he performs in postseason. Another right-handed bat. So you have 4 different bench bats that are likely being replaced. And if they are replaced specifically in-house, you're talking about guys that are replacing them, like a Dalton Rushing, another left-handed bat in this mix. Perhaps an Alex Freeland, a switch-hitting shortstop, switch-hitting infielder, another guy hits from the left side quite a bit. And then you start thinking to yourself, man, this lineup is starting to get pretty left-handed heavy. And especially if you have a James Outman that is in the mix, then you're starting to say, hey, there's Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, there's a Tommy Edman, there's Dalton Rushing, there's a Alex Freeland, there's a James Outman, 7 different guys at least that have the ability to hit left-handed. There might not be a whole lot, or maybe you need one of those guys that has the ability to hit right-handed, that has the ability to play center field, especially in this scenario, you don't necessarily know who's going to play center field, whether it's James Outman or an Andy Pages. Or if you need a corner outfielder that has the ability to hit right-handed, perhaps that could be something that you could need in the 2026 season and beyond. That's something that I don't have a whole lot to say, especially if you look at different options through free agency, you look at different options for the future. There's really not a whole lot of guys, especially right-handed bats specifically, that have the ability to play center field. If Andy Pages has the ability to play a consistent, regular center field, that is incredibly valuable to this organization. And especially with this team, there's not a whole lot of versatility that they were able to have in the outfield with a Teoscar Hernandez. Yes, he can switch between left and right field. Not a whole lot in center field. If you have the ability to have a guy that is a right-handed hitter that can play the center field position, I think long-term, that could be something that could be beneficial to this organization, which would be the case to keep around an Andy Pages long-term, although it certainly would be a risk and certainly would be a guy that you would have to keep within your organization for 2026 and beyond. You have him for a lot of years of club control, but he would have to be on your active big league roster. If in 2025 you say James Outman is the best fit for this team, or Ha-Seong Kim, best fit for this team, we're going to go with him over in Andy Pages. That is going to be a decision that you are going to have to make, and you're going to have to live with if you keep Andy Pages in this organization. Yes, there might be not a whole lot to run off of. Might not be a whole lot of experience to be able to go off. We're going to roll with him, and we're going to stick with him as long as we possibly can be, because in 2026 and beyond, there's no sending him down to Oklahoma City. It is, you are having him on your big league roster. That is part of the thing, and that is part of the conversation that we can have with spring training 2025, because both Ha-Seong Kim, who does have 3 minor league option years but was signed to a big league contract, he is fighting for a big league opportunity, and there's a lot of people that are anticipating the Dodgers signed him particularly for a reason, so they're excited to see what he's able to do on this active Dodgers roster, and believe that there's no real way to be able to get him acclimated to big league roster without having him be on the Los Angeles Dodgers roster. You talk about James Outman, he's scratching and clawing to be the type of player that he was during the 2023 season when he was a top 10 center fielder in the game of baseball, if not a top 5 or 6, 7 center fielder in the game of baseball. by WAR-wise with what he was able to do defensively, combine that with offensive ability, which if you're just able to get a little bit of offense, if you're able to get anywhere close to league average offense with James Outman, he is an incredibly valuable player for this team with what he's able to do defensively, locking that up. That is something that is important, to remember when we're talking about James Outman. And then you have the player Andy Pages, who also like James Outman, only one minor league option left, which means you don't have a whole lot of room to be able to decipher and be able to decide what you want to do with these guys, or at least you don't have a whole lot of time to be able to do that. One of the things that is helpful for the Dodgers organization, especially because they have a lot of veteran players and they're trying to win as much as they possibly can, is they need as much time as they can with their guys. That's one of the reasons why they trade players away for guys that are not going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft for at least 1 or 2 seasons, because that buys them more time to make additional decisions. They don't have the luxury of time with James Outman and Andy Pages. But Andy Pages, if we're talking about him, he might have some of the best upside with this club. But that upside likely is only going to come, or very likely comes, exclusively at the center field position, or at least primarily at the center field position. Is his bat going to be able to carry enough? And is his improvements at the center field position, if he's made improvements, significant enough to be able to help carry him onto this roster to make him a big league regular for this club? Because if we look at 2026, I think there very much could be a need for a right-handed outfield bat, especially a right-handed outfield bat that has the ability to play center field. There's not a whole lot of free agents like that. You could look at, the White Sox are going to pick up the club option for Luis Robert. You could make a trade for him. There certainly is questions about his offensive profile. I've raised those in the past, but still an incredibly talented player would lock that up. The only other ones that I could really find that are going to be free agents next year are guys like maybe Elaine Thomas, although he doesn't play a whole lot of center field. He has the ability to play center field, but not a whole lot. Would that lock up the center field position? I don't necessarily know. Those are questions that you're going to have to be able to answer if you're the Dodgers. And these are things that these guys, particularly these 3 players, are going to be fighting for in spring training to get answers for, because there are questions to be answered for. Yes, of course, there's going to be questions about the big league roster, but things are often going to sort themselves out as far as injuries, guys being able to call out, particularly on the pitching side. With Mookie Betts at the shortstop position, we'll be able to find out. And if things don't work out, guess what? Tommy Edman, he's going to play a lot of shortstop. Miguel Rojas is going to be able to back him up. And then you have Mookie Betts at second base, and that problem is solved. Maybe a Ha-Sung Kim, if he has the ability to play shortstop, could play the shortstop as well. Dodgers have options to be able to back that up. But what happens between these 3 guys does not just have an impact on 2026, not in 2025. It also has an impact on 2026 and beyond. And what is best for the roster this year might not be best for the roster in 2026, which leads to the question: do you lean into what is the best fit for the roster in 2025? What is best for the roster in 2026? If there is comparable statistics, if these guys have comparable springs. Because I think ultimately this is going to be decided on the field, on the backfields, throughout spring training. Then there's going to be some difficult conversation to be able to have with Ha-Sung Kim, James Outman, and Andy Pages, because I believe unless there is some type of injury, unless somebody is going to miss a period of time, that does not include Will Smith, because you need a catcher to be able to fill in for Will Smith. You won't replace Will Smith with James Outman unless he's learned the ability to play catcher. Unless there's another injury that is taking place on this roster, or unless the Dodgers decide to move off of Chris Taylor, which I am not anticipating at this moment, although it certainly is a possibility. Unless that happens, you're looking at a very intense battle between these 3 guys that is ultimately going to play a role in deciding what the future of the center field, what the future of this infield is going to look for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Should be an exciting time. I'm excited for spring training. So having something to fight for is worth watching. And I think this is going to be the most fascinating part of spring training to be able to see what we're going to watch here in LA. So let's see. Continuing on, we have a $9.99 super chat from Matt Kramer. Thank you very much for the super chat, Matt. I really appreciate you and what you're able to do, what you're able to contribute here. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. Conforto is on a 1-year roster, and Barnes and others will be off the roster. Let's just hold, and 26 can be delicious too. Yeah, that's going to be something where it could be something where if you're making the play for 2026, that could certainly be a case that you can make, especially for keeping guys like even a James Outman and an Andy Pages on this roster. You could say, hey, we don't really have a whole lot of outfielders that are going to be part of this roster in 2026. Or let's say that we want to bring in a Kyle Tucker, but there's still going to be opportunities potentially out in center field. Perhaps we want to keep these guys to make sure that we have outfielders in 2026. What that doesn't allow you to do is that doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. And let's say that you send one of these guys down, or let's say that you send Andy Pages down because you believe that James Outman is the best fit for the 2025 roster. That's putting a lot of stake into Andy Pages, who you want to expect to get a whole lot of opportunities, which right now they're projecting him to spend time at the minor league level and get a whopping 140 plate appearances at the big league level in 2025. If he only gets 140 plate appearances at the big league level in the 2025 season or something comparable, what's to tell you that he's going to be ready for the 2026 Dodgers team and be a contributing role or be a regular role for this Dodgers team? Let's say that he even gets 250, 300, or it goes exclusively against left-handed pitching, which, if we're talking about left-handed pitching versus right-handed pitching, being a platoon versus exclusively left-handers, you're talking about 120, 150 plate appearances throughout the course of the season. That is about all that you're going to be able to get versus left-handed pitching, which makes it a little bit more difficult for Andy Pages to see him potentially in that type of role. So it could be something if they're looking for, and if the role that they're fighting for is a regular position role, meaning a pretty regular starting role at the big league level. Let's say that Andy Pages, James Outman are fighting for the starting center field position. Then you could justifiably say, hey, we want to see if you have the ability to be able to stick on this roster, not just this year, but in 2026 and beyond, because we think that you might have a future as part of this organization, and they invest a lot of time to see what they're able to do. I think that is a significantly better choice for them to be able to make than to call one of these guys up and say, you know what, you're with the big league club, but you're not really with the big league club. You get to go and sit on the bench. You get to split playing time with Chris Taylor. You're not going to be able to get a whole lot and see what these guys are going to be capable of, and then you're gonna wonder, hey, why are these guys struggling when they're actually playing? It's because they're not able to adapt at the big league level to the degree of what they are capable of doing. So I think with these guys, and it particularly pertains to Andy Pages, because I think right now the perspective around the league is that he has the most value as a player. Doesn't mean that Sung Kim isn't valuable. He is incredibly valuable, but he has minor league options, so this conversation isn't worthy discussing because he has the ability for multiple option years to be able to go down. It has a conversation with James Outman and with Andy Pages, and I think Andy Pages right now would probably have a little bit more trade value than a James Outman would, because of the struggles that James Outman had at the big league level in 2024. Teams would have a little bit of questions, just like the Dodgers would probably do have some questions with James Outman at the big league level. You have to make a determination as far as not just do we want to have these guys around, but how do we get them acclimated and to the point that they're going to be ready at the big league level. Because if one of these guys has to take over a significant chunk in center field in 2026, they are going to have to play a significant chunk in center field in 2025 to get them to that point where they are ready, especially if it is a Andy Pages. If you want him to be ready, if you want him to be a regular outfielder, either he can't split time with Dalton Rushing in the outfield in 2026 in the corner outfield spot, and you can't go out there and sign a Kyle Tucker or somebody that is a high impact corner outfield, or, and this is very likely the scenario, you have to play him at the center field position. What's the best way to play him at the center field or get him ready to that? To get consistent, regular at-bats, which either is going to come at the major league level, in which case that's probably the best case scenario if you want him on the team long term, even if it's not the most ideal fit for this roster, righty versus lefty, because there's no lefties off of the bench. Even though that might not be the best case scenario, it gives him regular at-bats at the big league level while also regular playing time in center field. That is something that you have to take into account. Or if that's not the case, or if he's going to get a spot on the bench, then you might have to send him down to the minor league level and figure out what's going to be best for the 2025 Los Angeles Dodgers and let the chips fall where they may. It's intriguing to be able to talk both about 2025 and 2026 because this spring training, especially with this spot, has a big impact on that. I'm primarily talking about James Outman and Andy Pages, but if you want to get Hae-Sung Kim to a place where he is acclimated to the big league level, you could very much input him into this conversation and say, hey, he's got to get regular at-bats. You got to see what he has the ability to be able to do at some point this season, and getting him and acclimated to the big league level, especially if you're starting the season off in Japan, starting the season off in Asia, which I know he's not from Japan, he's from Korea. That could be something that could be highly impactful for him and something that the organization might want to do. We'll see what happens with that. We got a couple more super chats we'll get to, a couple more comments before we get into that. Sandman Logic, thank you very much for joining us. Pages and Outman, most value this year. We'll see what happens this year. Pre Ghosterberg, Pages is right fielder, his best position. I totally agree with that. He definitely fits in better at a corner outfield spot, particularly in right field. His arm is a cannon out there, and he would be great out there. That would be the position that if we started the season or started the offseason, at the beginning of the offseason, that's where I had Andy Pages penciled in as, was the starting right fielder for the Dodgers. That's not going to happen. Teoscar Hernandez is a right fielder. Michael Conforto, who they're expecting to have a little bit of a bounce-back season, given some of the underlying numbers, to be a rock-solid left fielder, corner outfield bat for them, which because of both of them, the only place to be able to play Andy Pages is center field. And if you look long-term, perhaps that's the only place long-term that they could fit Andy Pages as part of this roster. If you don't believe that he is a center fielder, if you believe that he's a corner outfielder, and you believe that he never will be a center fielder, and you want to take advantage of his value, his trade value, now's the time to do so. Because if you wait until you option him down at the minor league level, then his trade value is toast. His trade value is gone, or at least to the extent of his trade value is gone. You're not going to do a Michael Busch for a Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope type of trade. You're not going to get that type of value for that, even though you would have years of control. There just is limited flexibility there, or at least it would be harder to make that type of trade. Let's see. Matt Kramer, Pages will be needed at first injury. Even an infield injury brings Endman into the infield. Yeah, that's also another really good point that becomes a little bit more of a discussion, a little bit more of a conversation as far as this discussion, as far as if you wanted to trade in Andy Pages. Let's say that you were completely convinced, hey, I don't know what we're going to do. I want to maximize on the value that we have right now. Then you have to look for, okay, could we trade this guy for players that aren't going to be on the 40-man roster? Trade guys for the future. How would we be able to fill in those holes, fill in those shoes? And what would be able to do best for that? You would probably have to find somebody that has at least the ability to play a little bit of center field. Actually, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that, because if that's the case, you could potentially have James Outman. You could have even a Kike Hernandez be able to fill in a little bit of center field. But if Tommy Edman has to take a good chunk of infield work in any type of scenario where there is some type of injury, you certainly would like to have an Andy Pages. But do you see him exclusively as depth? Or could you use some of the other depth that you have, whether in this organization or other guys that you have signed to non-roster invites? We see a lot of times on the pitching side, they bring in guys, they keep them up for a little bit, and then they designate for them for assignment. Can you live with another Cavan Vigio type of situation during the regular season, which happened through the course of, and it lasted a little bit longer than what they were anticipating because it was a little bit more significant of an injury? Are you willing to lose some of the value on a player like an Andy Pages, lose significant value on a player like him to option him down in the minor leagues to keep necessary depth for the 2025 season? Or if you're talking about that, are you willing to risk that potentially even for a little bit later, potentially for the postseason, which is incredibly scary, I'm assuming that I won't get to that point, but are you risking it a little bit because your expectation is you're going to win the division really either way, whether you get Andy Pages being the first guy that's called up, or whether it's James Outman or Hae-Sung Kim, or if it's Austin Gauthier or Dalton Rushing or Alex Freeland that's called up, or they call up a David Bodie, or they get surprise contributions from guys like a Damon Keith or a Chris Newell or a whole bunch of different guys. There are a lot of guys that they have the ability to be able to call up. Will they have the same impact that Andy Pages does? Probably not. But to what degree is that, and what degree do you value that in comparison to the value that you have for Andy Pages is a good question. Vin1988, thank you very much for joining us, which, by the way, thank you for the $10 super chat, Vin1988. I know Casey is a huge fan of your name, as am I. It's one of the best, if not probably the best username that we have here, Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. Thank you very much. Very, very grateful for that and for the super chat. He also states, I would say trade Pages and some of the young stud pitchers for that center field in Chicago. That he would be talking about Luis Robert Jr. That would be, that certainly would fill in. He would be a right-handed center fielder that would be on this organization for the next couple of years. You could certainly try to leverage Andy Pages into that type of role. I have expressed concerns about Luis Robert and his profile of a hitter, meaning a guy that doesn't walk a whole lot, strikes out quite a bit. We've seen those type of players turn out to have pretty steep drop-offs once their power starts to dissipate, once they don't have a lot of power. And he actually didn't really have that great of a season last year when he came back. He had spurts where he was amazing, but it was inconsistent at times. And I think that inconsistency, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, even though his points where he has the ability to go out there and perform, it is all-star level production for Luis Robert. So that certainly could be a possibility, and he is one of the few names that is a right-handed bat that has the ability to play at least a decent center field that you could potentially leverage a Andy Pages for, or you could use an Andy Pages for somebody else. He wouldn't be the player that I would target first just because of the profile of player. There would be some other players that I might have in mind, especially if you're pairing Andy Pages with a little bit more depth that we could have. And I think there could be an argument, especially with some of the young pitchers. Yes, you want to see these guys perform and get opportunities at the big league level, but you're going to need to have at least a decent chunk of some of these guys to be able to come up through the course of the regular season, because we're already seeing Evan Phillips be injured. Perhaps we're seeing something with Michael Kopech, or at least there's been a lot of rumors, speculation that that's going to happen with him. There could be other stuff, and there will be other stuff that happens. To what extent of depth do you need to be able to help fill in, and how much of that depth you want to get rid of in some type of trade could be something that becomes a little bit of a question. So I'm not there quite yet, Vin. But it could be something where it could be something worthy exploring, because that type of player that has pretty high upside, that has the ability to fit well on this roster, you only really get this spring training if Andy Pages is not going to be on this club, if you want to leverage him into getting that type of player. So we'll see what happens. Matt Kramer says there will be injuries. Absolutely there will be, especially with this depth, meaning with the talent that's on this roster, with the players that the Dodgers target. They target a lot of players pitching-wise, insane level of stuff. but there's a little bit more risk for injuries, a little bit more risk for drawing a lot of walks or throwing a lot of walks. They target those specific types of players, and that puts them at a little bit more of a risk right there. Let's see. Continuing on right now, CNAV, Kristen Rivaro, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for the $10 super chat as well. I'm super grateful for you. Great takes as usual. Definitely my favorite YouTube show. Really appreciate that. We really appreciate all the support we get here at Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. Cranial discussions about Dodgers baseball without the corny chat. Yeah, that's something that we try to do, Dodgers Dawgs, is we try to think as deep as we possibly can and try to explore all different aspects that I could come up with, and I kind of go back and forth. You've seen me discuss this throughout the show today, and especially if you watch the show on Monday, I go back and forth all the time as far as whether or not I think it is in the best interest for the Dodgers to trade Andy Pages or not. It is a big struggle for myself as far as what I think the best decision for this organization is, and I think it's ultimately going to be decided in spring training and what the ultimate decision, ultimate role for him or for whoever wins out of spring training, what he is able to do and what the Dodgers are going to be able to offer him, what the best decision for him is going to be. But is he the best fit for the Dodgers this year? Maybe not. I don't know what his defense is going to look like. Is he the best fit for 2026? I think he's a better fit probably than James Outman, although there still remains question about the outfield defense next year. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. Continuing on right here, Matt Kramer, Austin, I disagree on the fine points, but you're absolutely the best. Yeah, I mean, it's not something where you have to agree with every single point that I have to say. What I want to try to do with this is I want to try to branch out as much logic as I possibly can. And I want to let you guys know where I get to each one of these decisions. You'll notice my brain doesn't work necessarily linearly all the time. It moves around quite a bit because there is a lot to be able to discuss. And if I make some sort of point, I want to try to make sure that it comes with some sort of things to back it up. And then you could say, okay, at this point, at this branch, there might be a little bit of disagreement on, but if I take your branch of logic, if we divert it away from what mine was and towards what you might have, I could see how you could draw a little bit from this conclusion. I could see where there's a difference, as was stated a little bit during the comment section, as far as trading some of the depth for pitching. There's an excess of depth if we come to this conclusion, and I think this is kind of where the branch starts. There's an excess of depth that we have on the pitching side, with not a whole lot of room for these guys to be able to get opportunities. And there's one argument that says, yes, there's going to be injuries. We need that depth to be able to do that. And there's another argument to say, we have a little bit too much depth. We can trade some of these guys while they have opportunities to be able to trade these guys, get them big league opportunities as well. I think having that discussion, having that back and forth is something that's super fun to be able to do, and the approach that I like to take, rather than to say that I'm right about every single thing. I'm not right about every single thing. There's going to be a lot of takes that I get wrong, but it is my job to be able to present whatever take that I have and be able to help present it in a logically defined way that you guys can be able to follow, and that's backed up by some sort of evidence. It might not be the decision that the Dodgers take. It might not necessarily even be the outcome that happens on the field, but at least it's backed up with a lot of different facts. That's what I'm looking for right now. Got a couple more super chats. We'll get to those in just a second. Let's see. Continuing on right here. Vin1988 talking about Kristen Navarro. I listen to games on the radio. That's awesome. I enjoy listening to games on the radio. They do a good job. I have a boy with Austin, and I like to drive him around listening to the game. Love Rick Monday. Yeah, Rick Monday is awesome. Didn't get a whole lot to grow up with Dodgers radio, so I actually didn't get to listen to Vin Scully a whole lot, which is disappointing because he was the best what he's able to do. But whenever I'm driving home from a Loons game, I typically turn on the Dodgers game on the radio. So I listened to that quite a bit. Growing up, I listened to a lot of Tigers baseball. Didn't always grow up with cable, but it was always Dan Dickerson and Jim Price on the radio that I grew up on. Definitely not Dodgers baseball, but they do a great job with what they're able to do, and I still enjoy listening to that when I get the chance to. Let's see. ZT99, I believe that's how you pronounce that. Do you think they will pick up Max Muncy's club option next year? It is my expectation that they're going to pick up the Max Muncy club option. The reason why I state that is because it is a very affordable club option at just $10 million. And by all accounts, with Max Muncy and his production, he's still an incredibly productive hitter. And having that type of hitter that you can pick up for $10 million, I believe is an easy decision to be able to make as an organization. And an added bonus with this, and this is the exact same argument that I make with Chris Taylor. Max Muncy is currently at a little bit over 8 years of service. You pick him up for that $10 million club option, which is very affordable for the organization, in line with the level of production that Max Muncy has. Then you get him to his 10 years of service, and that's just another added bonus that you can have added to the legacy of this Dodgers organization and the players. Just another way to be able to show your appreciation while also getting a highly effective player with a good contract. It will depend on how Max Muncy does throughout the course of the season, and his role in 2026 will be determined by what they do during next offseason. I believe it's Murakami, I don't remember his first name, is going to be a free agent. I believe he plays third base. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Coming over from Japan. He's going to be somebody that the Dodgers are going to be linked to, or at least there's going to be a lot of speculation because they brought in a lot of free agents or international free agents from Japan that they're going to be linked to, and that could be something where that could impact some of their decision with Max Muncy. However, my expectation would be that they pick him up, and if they get Murakami and they don't see any other role for Max Muncy, maybe they look to trade Max Muncy. However, I think they pick up that club option if he is anywhere close to the level of production that he has. I think that is, unless Max Muncy doesn't want to play baseball in 2026, that would at least be my expectation. Continuing on with this right now, Matt Kramer, and there's a lot of back and forth that we'll talk about. I only disagree on the Paje subject. I think there is a very decent chance that he's a full-time outfielder for the Dodgers in 2026, depending on Albin. Yeah, I would totally agree. And as I stated a little bit, there is going to be a need for a right-handed outfielder that's going to be part of this lineup in 2026. And that could certainly be a thing where when you have an Andy Pages, you have him part of your organization, that could help fill in that role, fill in that void right there. And he could still get some at-bats in the corner outfield, even if you want to split Dalton Rushing and Andy Pages at the corner outfield, let's say left field or right field, whatever the position that you want to put either of them in. However, I think the primary role for him going forward as part of this organization, or at least the place where there's going to be the most ample opportunities, is going to be center field. And we'll see if he has the ability to play center field at a consistent level. In 1988, Pages definitely has potential, but I believe the Dodgers want proven guys at this point with all the money invested. I think that's totally true. You look at the moves, one of the reasons why they went after Michael Conforto is because they believe in the upside, the potential, and they believe that he is a proven guy. If they option Andy Pages down to the minor league level this season, then you get to the 2025-2026 offseason, and then Andy Pages would not have any minor league options, which means he would have to be on your major league roster. This organization already shows that they like the proven type of guys. Andy Pages wouldn't be a proven type of guy unless he got called up at some point during the 2025 season that got him consistent regular at-bats. If you want him to be on your 2026 roster, I think he needs probably at least 300 major league plate appearances this season, which either comes through some type of injury takes place or he starts the season on the club. I think if you get him that, he could get to a point and he's seen at least enough regular major league pitching and gotten hopefully enough time at the center field position to where you could rely on him to be a little bit more of a regular next season. If it is less than that, if it is significantly less than that, then it becomes a little bit more of a question, a little bit more of an issue, and then you're rolling the dice on a player that hasn't gotten a lot of big league experience, that does not have any flexibility, which that would be the case with Andy Pages next season. Let's continue and go right here. Craig Osterberg, thank you very much for joining us. Who will take up Ohtani's base stealing with the injury? I think he steals less than 20 bases. Yeah, that's going to be intriguing to be able to see Ohtani and what he does on the base stealing front. Not expecting a whole lot of stolen bases, or at least not immediately expecting a whole lot of stolen bases. He's Shohei Ohtani, though. He can go out there and practically do anything on the baseball field. However, you're absolutely correct. He has to make sure that he is taking care of himself. And this is a team that, frankly, does not have a whole lot of players that are going to steal a whole lot of bases, especially with it being, and I believe that it is, the oldest projected roster on the big leagues. Just don't have a ton of guys that have a ton of speed. Maybe you could look to Tommy Edman stealing a couple of bases. Maybe you could look to a little bit of Mookie Betts now that he's going to be hopefully healthy for the full season. You don't really have a whole lot of guys that are going to be stealing a whole lot of bases, which could be an argument for bringing in a guy like a Hae-Sung Kim. Could be a guy that could steal at least a decent chunk of bases, or a James Outman has a decent amount of speed. Andy Pages, I don't think he projects as much to be the pretty big base stealer. So that's going to be something that could be an element to this team that they miss. And so they might want to bring in a guy or have a guy part of their club. It's a little bit adds a little bit of that speed element. Could be an argument for a Hae-Sung Kim, like where you're thinking right here. Continuing to go right now. Matt Kramer sounded critical. I only mean to say it's my argument. I think homegrowns are good for loyalty in business as far as homegrown players. It's Chris Navarro. 6 days until get to go down to my first Dodgers spring training game. $10 goes towards a bratwurst. Try the first base side grill out in the outfield. Pure awesomeness. Well, I really appreciate that, CNAB. I'm excited to enjoy some food over in Camelback Ranch. To be able to do that, yeah, that would be something I'll definitely get and be able to try that out and just be able to enjoy a baseball game out there, out on the West Coast, is something that I don't really get a whole lot to be able to do. And so that's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to the games, looking forward to this competition, as well as just being able to spend some time on the backfields and be able to just see some of the coaches, some of the players that I've gotten to meet over there. Those are going to be a lot of, for most people, it is the players on the main field that they know the most about, because those are the players that they see on the big league TV. And so the players that, especially the ones that get the first couple of innings, get super excited about. The players that get the last couple of innings, and the players that are going to be on the backfield, not just the players, the coaches, some of the family members, that's going to be the thing that I'm looking forward to perhaps the most, is being able to reconnect with some of those people, some of the people that I thought I probably would never see again because they moved up to the upper levels of the minor leagues and they're fighting for their careers and they move all sorts of around. That's going to be super excited to be able to have. I really appreciate it, Christopher Navarro. And then thank you again, Matt Kramer, another $9.99 super chat. You guys are amazing tonight. I'm really grateful for each one of you guys. Young Yi, if Miller and Outman come back to anywhere close to 2023 forms, it will be a great booster for the team. That's absolutely going to be amazing to be able to see if they're able to do that. That would be an added bonus to this club. If you get the Bobby Miller with as much potential as he showcased in 2023, and James Outman, who was a 4-WAR player in 2023, if you get another 4-WAR player on this club, especially with the defense that he's going to be able to provide at center field, holy cow, that would be amazing. That would be such an added boost to this club. Matt Kramer says that $10 is for the best analysts in the biz. Come to LA. There's a future for you here. We'll see what happens. We'll see what my future is as far as what I'm going to have. Right now, I'm super happy to be Dodgers Daily, part of the Dodgers Daily network. And we'll see what happens going forward. I'm super appreciative of you and all the support that you're able to have for me. We'll get to a couple more comments right now, or 1 or 2 more comments. Mr. Seabad, thank you very much for joining us. Players should have to be integrated significantly. Let's see, continuing on right now, I don't know if that has anything to do with Dodgers baseball. We'll see just right now. Christian Navarro, absolutely. Matt Vin 1988. 2023 World Series had 2 wild card teams in Texas and Arizona. Just get into the tournament. Yeah, that's absolutely right. You just have to get into the tournament and we'll be able to see what happens. Steven Richter, I think rookie is third in betting on odds to win Rookie of the Year. I'd give him a pretty good shot at being able to win Rookie of the Year. And then I think the last chat that we're going to be able to talk about, Vin1988, pardon my ignorance here, what does 4 WAR player mean? It's a very good question. So when we're talking about 4 WAR type of players, it has to do with WAR. WAR is a statistical metric called wins above replacement that is intended to measure the overall aspect of a player's game. It doesn't just take into account the player's ability to hit the baseball. Things like batting average, things like OPS, things like WRC plus, number of home runs. Different statistic to be able to measure how well they're able to impact a baseball field on the offensive side. Wins above replacement is the statistics specifically designed to try to take into account not just offense, but every single aspect. How does this player go about running bases, stealing bases? How often does he get the extra base? There are measures that are put into the calculation in this giant formula that's super complicated for both offense and on the base running, as well as defense. Defense is taken into account right now in there. So with James Outman, I believe he was a 118 WRC plus player, meaning he was 18% above league average. That usually doesn't equate to a 4 WAR type of player, but because he played regularly and because he was able to be decent on the base paths, and especially because he provided solid defense at the center field position, what they determined is his WAR value was roughly equivalent to 4. Now with WAR, this is something that you accumulate the more that you're able to play. It is cumulative, meaning that the more that you get to play, the more WAR that you could potentially earn. But if you especially look at the leaderboards as far as MVPs, especially of recent seasons, usually the guys with the highest WARs, which is closer to 8, 9, 10 WAR, are the MVP type of players. If you get a player that's closer to around 2 WAR throughout the regular season and they're pretty consistent regular, that just means they're a little bit more of a regular type of player. It's a little bit different to put this on a scale because it's cumulative rather than looking at a scale like WRC plus. But if you get a player that's 4 WAR, I'll just put it this way. There was only 5 or 6 center fielders in 2023 that accumulated at least 4 wins above replacement, and James Outman was one of those players. That puts you in that type of category. That's how good that type of player is. So it would be something that I would highly encourage you to be able to look into. Very nerdy type of stuff, baseball wise, because you have to dive in really deep to be able to see all the formulas to understand the process of how it works, but understand it as a measure to be able to say how good of an overall baseball player you're able to be on the field. So that would be what it is, WAR type of player. We might have a show that we can do a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the analytics type of stuff. Christopher Navarro, the backfield games are awesome. I watched the Dodgers versus Reds game with 5 other people. Keibert Ruiz was catching, and Carlos Frias was on the mound. I don't remember a whole lot of Carlos. Keibert, I remember just a little bit. And then one more $10 super chat for Christopher Navarro. I really appreciate that. Bratwurst for my dad. Hope you guys have a great time. Take notes for the show. Yeah, couldn't thank you enough, Christopher Navarro. Thank you, Matt Kramer, Vin1988, all of you guys. Super appreciative of you guys. Yeah, no, I'll definitely make sure I'll buy my dad bratwurst, buy him some food as well. I'm excited to be able to do that and be able to take that in. There will be some times where I'll be able to talk about that. I don't know necessarily what my schedule is going to be next week. I will have a show on Monday. It will be Monday, normal time, 5:15 Eastern, 2:15 Pacific. That's the only time that I'm able to make Monday work for me. I'll do a show by myself. Then Wednesday and Friday, I believe Casey's going to go live. If I have time, I might be able to pop in. However, I won't be able to use my computer setup. Probably won't be bringing my computer here. Literally will probably be just my phone that I'll be recording on if I have the chance to be able to do so. I'm going to try to enjoy it. Might get a few videos, might get a few pictures. We'll be able to see. try to take some time to be able to sit back and be able to enjoy it. So I'm super grateful for you guys, super grateful for the support that you guys have, for supporting me, the journey out to spring training, the venture here at Dodgers Daily. So a couple weeks ago when I was having some issues with my car, being able to help out with that, which seems to be operating a lot better right now. So I'm super grateful for all of you guys. It is a fun culture that is being built here at Dodgers Daily, and it is a great culture that is built in Los Angeles. It is a culture of teamwork. It is a culture that treats its players incredibly well. It also is a culture where in spring training there's going to be highly competitive. These players, and some of these players are fighting for a roster spot and might be one of the only opportunities that they're going to be able to get. And how those roster spots are determined could determine their fate in future within this organization, particularly when we're talking about the position player battle, which likely is only going to be for one spot. Yes, another spot could open up, whether through injury or if they decide to move off of Chris Taylor. But in all likelihood, the Dodgers have 3 players fighting for one spot. And I think there's a compelling case for each one of those. As we start spring training games, which will be starting on Thursday, just 6 days away until we're going to be regularly watching Dodgers baseball almost every single day from then until hopefully late October. We're going to have the ability to be able to watch a whole lot of baseball. It's going to be intense, competitive, and it's going to be a short spurt because this opening day is going to come early this year with the Dodgers starting in Japan, which means the opportunity to be able to succeed and make an impact starts right now for these guys. And they've been down in spring training for quite a bit, and they're going out there giving it everything they've got. Thank you very much for joining us here. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. It's always a privilege when I'm able to go on. Casey was not able to be here tonight. He was out with the bride on Valentine's Day, so happy to be able to fill in on a Friday night for you guys and be able to talk some Dodgers baseball. Until next time, which I believe will be Sunday evening. Casey usually goes on Sunday evening. There's not the big game this week. There's not, so there's nothing to be worried about that. Assuming that he's free with his schedule, I believe and am expecting him to go live then. If not live Sunday, I'll be live on Monday. Those are the 2 next scheduled events here. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. Until then, thank you very much for joining in, and go Dodgers.